Hello everyone, my name is Riam and I'll be explaining what is Dart and giving you a quick guide of Dart, which is a programming language. It's nothing more, just a programming language that helps us with building mobile applications, web development, and many more things. And hopefully in this short video you will get a quick grasp of what Dart is, how Dart looks like, and helps you with better understand Dart and you continuing on in your research process to learn Dart. So let's just get started. Start by writing our first application in Dart, and to do that we have to have a starting point. Any application must have a starting point, and the starting point in Dart is as follows: void main and then curly parentheses and curly brackets, and between the curly brackets we're gonna have the code for our starting point. And let's say we want to print something in the console, so we write print and then we say hello world, and we have to end it with a semicolon for any line of code we write. And basically we run and it should show us our first application, hello world. Now let's start by learning the different data types in Dart. There are many different data types, and we have already talked about the main, which is our starting point of our application, and whatever we have in between will be printed out first. So the different data types you can notice is a string, an int, a double, and I have written here a comment. A comment which will never be printed in the console, is just for the programmer to understand that, oh, this is a string. And now a string will contain the string value. It could never contain, let's say, a number. I cannot come here and write a number and store it in a string data type. Let's come here and print. We have already seen how to write the print statement. And let's say I want to print whatever value you have in this name variable. Okay, I have here 12. So let's print it. Print the value you stored, and I come here and I run. It shows an error because I have not stored a string data type. So let's go back to storing a string data type, which is Sarah. So now we have covered the basics of the data types. You have already crossed these before: a string, an int, a double, and a boolean. But what is a var? A var is a special data type in Dart, and this special data type understands the data type from the thing you write. So let's say I'm gonna write here color, and I say equal, and I give it a string. I say pink, that's Sarah's favorite color, and I come here and I print color, and if I run, this will automatically understand that this is a string, automatically prints it. And if I say, let's say I give it a number and I say print, it will automatically reads this and assumes that this is an int. So now that we have covered the different data types, the var and the string and all, there's something else you should keep in mind, something called a null safety. This is very important in Dart. What do I mean by that? Let's say that I removed this and I just left a semicolon. I left it empty here, and I came here and I printed this. What will show? This will show an error because I left it empty. It is an empty value, and this causes an error. This is very important in Dart and you should focus on it. You should never leave it empty. But let's assume that Sarah doesn't have a favorite color. She doesn't have it. So how will I leave this empty? I don't want this to cause an error. I want it to be empty, a null value. To do this, you have to add a question mark after the data type. And if you write a question mark, it will automatically know that this could be a value that is null or has a value. Okay, so let's try to print this out. Let's come here and run. Will this cause an error again? You can notice that this will actually not cause an error, and it will return a null. This means that there is nothing here. Leave it alone. Don't bring me an error. And now let's talk about something that is really important in Dart, which is called the final and a const. So let's take this for an example. We already covered a string which stores a string value, like name is a string called Sarah. Let's say that I wanted to change the name and give it another name, and I come here and I take the variable and I say name equals to, let's say, Nasser. Okay, for instance, I changed it to Nasser, and I want to use the print statement to print the new name variables. And I come here and I say print. When it prints, it should show me that this is changed to Nasser. But does this make sense that a name changes during the program runtime? This doesn't make sense. A name shouldn't be changing. It should be constant, final. Name Sarah doesn't change to Nasser. So how would I do this in code? How do I make this never change? To do this, we will use something called final keyword. So the final keyword will be written as following. You say final, and then you will say name equals to, and let's say for instance to Sarah. And I say print this name for me, and it should show me the Sarah. So it will print for me here Sarah, okay? You can write it this way, or you can also give it a string. Because you already know that this is a string, you can give it here string, and this will also show me the same result. And also, let's say for instance you still don't know the name. Let's say I remove this and I leave the name empty here, and I leave it remove empty, and after a while I already know the name. I come here and I'll be like, okay, name equals to Sarah. This will be okay because I assigned it once. I came here and I finally knew the name and I give it Sarah. But let's say I come here again and I want to change the name back to Nasser. So I come here and I say Nasser, and let's remove the print statement and place it here, and let's say I want to print this. This will not be okay because you changed the final keyword. The final keyword, we already assigned it to Sarah, so this should never be updated. It's a only one-time thing assignment. So now that we looked at the final keyword, let's look at the const. The const is very similar to the final. You basically come here and say const, and let's say name equals to Sarah again, and then let's give it let's print the value, which is name, and then let's come here and print. So I said before, I got like technical issues. Anyway, this const value should show me the name Sarah, but I cannot do like I said previously, like the final. I cannot come here and I just leave it open and I say name equals to, for instance, Sarah again. I cannot do this. This is not okay because const value should be assigned from one statement. It should not be updated in another statement. So let's look at the differences between them. How can we differentiate? What is the difference between these two? Now, to better understand the difference between a const and a final, let's take this for an example. Let's assume you wanted to bake cookies. To bake cookies, you will need a list of ingredients. List of ingredients such as 2 cups of flour, 2 cups of sugar. And all of this will be written down in the list of ingredients. It's done. It's already predefined before you start baking. But for the number of chocolate chips, it will never be written down. You will never know exactly the number of chocolate chips until you start the baking. That is why the difference between a const and a final can be as follows. The const, it's a compile time constant. It's a number you write down before you start. It's like the baking. It's like number of sugar. It's already written down, 2 cups. But a final, it's a number you figure out while you're doing something. So the number of chocolate chips, you will never know until you start the baking process. Now let's talk about Dart's collection. Dart has many different types of collection, but we're going to cover 2, which is the list and a map. A list, like it sounds, is just a list of items. We already covered before a string data type, and it held the name Sarah. Now I want multiple names, not only Sarah. How would I do this? I will use var. There's multiple ways, but let's use var since we already learned it. And I'm going to use var, and I'm going to give it names equal to, and I put this brackets, end it with a semicolon, and var will know by this that this is a list automatically. And now I can put the list of names, let's say Sarah, and let's say Nasser. So now we can print the value that it stores by calling the names and accessing the index. So this is index 0, and it should print Sarah. Now let's use the other way. Okay, let's use the other way. And how would we do this? Let's remove this for now. The other way is simply you say lists and you put these, and in between you will put the type of thing you're gonna store. So I'm gonna store string. So I'm gonna put string, and then I'm gonna call it names, the variable, and then equal to, and inside this list I'm gonna put the same things I did before. Sarah, and also I'm gonna put Nasser. So here I have the names by using this method, specifying that this is a string. If I come here and I say int, this should show me an error because this is not a string. Now let's look at the other data type. We covered list. Now let's look at a map. What is a map? A map, it's a key value pair. So how would you do this map? Map, let's write var again, and let's say it's a list of names and equal to, but I'm not gonna do this. I'm gonna use this curly braces, and then I'm gonna put a value, a key I mean. Here should be a key, and then put this and put value. So here I will have the key and here I will have the value. So let's say I'm gonna give Sarah an ID of 1, and then I'm gonna give her a name. Let's say here a name actually, and then I'm gonna give her a name of Sarah. And this is my map, a key and a value pair. And to print the value is simple. You just come here and say names, and then let me write this, names, and then you access it by using the key, which is 1, and it should print Sarah. So let's run it. It's already showing Sarah from previously, and you can tell that it runs Sarah. Now let's say I want to merge the two. I want to have a map plus a list. How would I do this? To do this, I will write list. I will go back and put these brackets, and inside of this, instead of writing a string like previously, I will write a map. And also I will do this again by putting these brackets, and inside of this I will write the type of key and the type of value I'm gonna have. So I want to have a string key, and I want to have a string value. So I want to have a string key and a string value, and then I'm gonna call this names. It's a new one. I'm gonna call it names equal to a list, because this is a list. So inside of the list, let me just remove this. Inside of the list, what will I have? Inside of the list, I will have a map. You see here, a map. So let me create a map. And how would I do this? Put this curly brackets, and this is map 1. And inside the map 1, I'm gonna have a string key, a string value. Let's come here and say a string key will be name. A name is equal to, let's say, Nasser. That's a name. And then I come here and then I put this and I make another map. Let's copy this, and then I put this and I put another map with a string key and a string value, and I call this Sarah, okay? And I end this with a semicolon. Here I created myself a list of maps. And how do we print this? It's basically like this. You come here, you call names, and then you say names, the list of names, give me number 1. You say 1. I want the first element in the list, I mean 0. You say the first element, which we start with index 0, and then I want to access the key name. So I come here and I say I want to access the key name, and it should show you the name Nasser. So let's run this and see the value. It should show you now the name Nasser. And the benefit of this is that the map will contain multiple things. Maybe the name Nasser, maybe it will contain here also the age. Let me just write it clearly. To contain the age, and you have to separate them. So you separate them, so it could contain here age, and Nasser could be, let's say, 20. So you can have a map of more than one item, a key value pair. Now let's take a look at the control flow statements in Dart. Let's take a look at the first one, which is the if. Let me just comment out all the other code, and we're gonna talk about it right now. But first, let's take a look at the if. Let's assume we have here an int variable year 2002, and we want to check if it's greater than 2001, then I want you to print this first century, and if not, print the 20th century. So it should show us the value, let me check. It should show us the 21st century. As you can tell, it just checked if this value has been met, please print out this, else If the value this is different, please print out the 20th century. This is the if and else if, and we can also come here and say else, and else will contain whatever does not meet any of these conditions, and we can print it out here. Now let's take a look at the other one, which is the for loop. The for loop, as you can tell, it's basic. Here we have a list of names, name Sarah and Nasser, and we're telling this. We're saying for final object in names, any object in this name, I want you to loop around it and print the value. So let's take a look at it. It should print the name Nasser and Sarah. So it goes in the names, takes the first one and goes, and takes the second one and goes. And you can also write it the other way, which is basically you could say for int I equal to 0 when I is less than the names dot length. I want to I plus plus, and you could say this, and you could print the names. So you access the names index I, and it should show you exactly the same result. So let's try to run it, and it shows you the same result. So there's multiple ways to write the for loop. Now let's take a look at the while. The while is also pretty simple. It's just while the year is less than 2005, please increment. So let's increment, and also let's print the value of it so you can see the result. Let me just copy this. Let's print the year, and then we can come here and say print year, and it should show you the looping of the year by incrementing each year. We started out with 2 and now we ended up with 5. Now let's talk about functions. What is function? A function, it's a way to perform a specific task. So how do we write a function? Well, we already talked about the main, which is the starting point of our application, and this is a function. This is the starting point and it's a function. But how do we create our own function? To create your own function, you will define first the type of it. So let's say I want to have an int function. I'm gonna call it add, and then I will write inside whatever type of things I want to do inside this function. So I want to add a value. I want to add, let's say, a plus b. Okay, so first I will have to pass down the values a plus b. So I'll come here and be like a, b, and then I will add the 2, and then I will return them back to the main. So I'll come here, add them, and return them back to the main, and don't forget the semicolon. So now I'll come here, call the function add, and then pass down the values. I want to, let's say, 12 plus 3. It should show me what? It should show me nothing because I haven't printed the value. So let me come here and say print. Let me copy this function, and then I'll put it here, and then let me print this function. Let me come here and say add, and I'm gonna say 12, 5, and then let me do print. It should show me the addition of the 2 values. So this is a function, and it's performing something that I want, and there is also many different types of data type, and you could use everything we've learned before, and also use void. Void is basically just a function that does not return anything. So if I say void, this function does not return anything. This should be an error because I said void, which is non-returnable type, and you could use it to easily do this. You can as easily come here, copy this print statement, and add it here, and you can say print a plus b. So this is what you could do with a void. You could just come here from the main and say add 21 plus 4, and you say run. So this is a void function. You can tell that this runs. Now let's talk about classes. What is a class? A class is a very important concept in all programming. A class is like a blueprint that has collection of all the properties that a specific object has. An object is a person, is a car, is something that has different properties. Let's say we have an object student. A student has a name, has an age, has an ID. So all of these properties go under the student, which is the student is an object. And this is the class is the blueprint for this object. Let's say I created here my class, I gave it a class keyword, and then I gave it a name, student. I wrapped it in a parenthesis here, a curly brackets I mean, and then I came to the main, which is the starting point of my application, and I created an object of this class. An object, this student, I have a student number 1, assuming I am a student. So this is my object. I have a name, I have an age, and I have an ID. I passed it to the class. I passed it down. So this is my class, I've created it, and I passed it my name, say Sarah, and then age, and then the ID. This is all because of the properties. And by passing it down like this, it's by using the constructor. You see, this constructor help us to pass down the name, the age, and the ID. And also, I can have methods. A student can say, I have a name, or student can say, I've studied. So this method, this function that we studied before, look at this void function, can be accessed like this. Say student name, here, student.study. Call the study method. Here I'm calling this method to access this. I'm calling this method. And here I've called my method. I have also printed out the student 1, which is me. This is my name, student 1. And I said student 1 dot name. I've accessed this property. And I said age and student ID. So this is what a class is. It basically is just a blueprint that has everything that relates to a specific object. Now finally, let's see how we can get input from the user. We have to import the dart.io file in order to access this function that helps us retrieve the input from the user. Let's assume we wanted to get the username. We will first ask the user to enter the name and store this name in this variable. And let's look at this example in order to better understand by writing .run. And here, let me say Sarah. And here I got the username. I can also, lastly, I want you to keep in mind that I have not covered everything in Dart. There is many things that Dart language is able to do. So in order to better understand or learn what Dart can do, you can find more in the Dart documentation. You can see it here in the language. You can get the introduction, get the basics. Look, we have learned also about the main of the function. We have learned about the variables, the control flow. We have learned about the functions, and there is many more that we haven't covered. Just remember one thing, the programming is not about memorizing these things, it's just about being able to use them and implement them in the code you learn.